Iran does not need a clean battlefield victory to win this war. If Tehran stays functional, if Gulf confidence in Washington keeps eroding, and if the global economy keeps paying for every week of fighting, then the campaign against Iran may already be producing the one result the U.S. and Israel needed to avoid. This war will not be decided by how many sites were hit in a single night. Iran does not need a clean battlefield win to come out ahead. If Tehran stays in the fight, if its command system keeps running, if Gulf capitals keep questioning the cost of Washington's security umbrella, and if the global economy keeps paying more for every extra week of conflict, that damage still will not give Washington and Israel the political result they need. Most scorecards are still too small. They count strikes, destroyed launchers, intercepted drones, damaged bases, and high-profile kills. Those numbers matter. They do not settle the war by themselves. The real question is whether the United States and Israel can turn tactical superiority into a political end state that is stable, affordable, and accepted by the region around them. Iran built its system to make that conversion fail. The logic came out of the Iran-Iraq War from 1980 to 1988. Tehran did not come out of that conflict believing it had fought Iraq alone. It came out believing that any future war would bring sanctions, isolation, indirect pressure, and outside backing for its enemies. After the 1979 revolution and the arms embargo that followed, Iran learned that dependence on conventional supply lines was a weakness. So it built another model: self-reliance, proxy depth, dispersed command, and the ability to absorb punishment without collapsing. That is the starting point for this video. Iran does not need to dominate the sky, the sea, or diplomacy to claim a form of victory. It only needs to prove that American and Israeli power still cannot produce the one thing both countries need most in a long war: a decisive and durable finish. Iran may be damaged, but it is still pulling its enemies into the exact kind of contest it prepared for over nearly 4 decades. Iran built this war over decades, not months. The system that now looks stubborn from the outside was shaped by repeated cycles of isolation, improvisation, and battlefield learning. During the Iran-Iraq War, Ali Khamenei served as president, while the Islamic Republic fought a grinding conflict that Tehran never saw as a simple two-state war. In the Iranian view, Iraq was the immediate attacker, but the larger pressure environment included outside powers and Arab backing that widened the gap in money, arms, and diplomacy. When Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini died in 1989, Khomeini did not inherit an abstract ideology. He inherited a state memory built around encirclement and survival. That memory shaped force design. The United States has maintained extensive sanctions on Iran since the seizure of the U.S. Embassy in 1979, and the current sanctions architecture still targets shipping, energy, banking, and sanction evasion networks. In December 2025, the U.S. Treasury said the administration had sanctioned more than 180 vessels responsible for shipping Iranian petroleum and petroleum products, part of a broader pressure campaign against what Washington calls the shadow fleet. Tehran did not answer by stepping back. It answered by building a war model meant to function while cut off from normal supply chains. That is where the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps became more than a military organization. It became the institutional engine of asymmetric deterrence. Instead of trusting one conventional structure that could be broken in a short campaign, Iran spread risk outward. It invested in domestic missile production, layered logistics, non-state partners, and forward defense beyond its borders. Iraq after 2003 became a live laboratory for this model. Syria after 2011 made it deeper and harder. Iran-backed militias in Iraq learned how to pressure a stronger military through attrition, improvised explosive networks, and political endurance. In Syria, Hezbollah and Iranian-linked networks gained battlefield experience that made them larger, better armed, and more experienced than they had been before the civil war. CSIS notes that Hezbollah is more capable than in 2006, and that its Syrian experience improved urban warfare and battlefield coordination. By the time this war began, Iran had roughly 35 years of accumulated practice in how to survive pressure from stronger conventional opponents. That does not make Iran invulnerable. It makes Iran hard to finish. In this war, That is not a side detail. It is the center of the design. Once that history is clear, the decapitation question looks different. The United States and Israel have spent years refining kill chains, intelligence fusion, and leadership targeting. Those tools can destroy sites, eliminate commanders, and compress decision time for the enemy. But they do not automatically break a system built to keep moving after losses. Iran's model is not organized around the fantasy that leaders are never hit. It is organized around the assumption that they will be. That is why the command network was built with regional nodes, layered succession, and the ability to shift functions across organizations and theaters. The Iraq record explains why that matters. Defense 1. Citing the first comprehensive accounting from U.S. Central Command, reported that between November 2005 and December 2011, 1,526 explosively formed penetrators killed 196 U.S. troops and wounded 861. Later, Pentagon-linked figures raised the broader count of U.S. troops killed in Iraq by Iranian-backed militants from 2003 to 2011 to 603. Those are not symbolic numbers. They show that Iranian strategy did not just produce slogans, militias, and speeches. It produced systems that imposed real military costs on a stronger adversary over time. Syria deepened the lesson. Hezbollah did not enter that war as a force built for prolonged expeditionary learning. It came out of it bigger, blooded, and more experienced in urban warfare, battlefield coordination, anti-tank operations, and sustained combat under air pressure. That matters here because decapitation works best when the target organization is brittle, centralized, and unable to replace competence quickly. Even the argument in favor of decapitation makes that clear. A Belfer Center study found that, on average, leadership decapitation can increase the chances of ending insurgencies rapidly and improve the odds of government victory. That is exactly why the Iranian case is so uncomfortable for Washington and Tel Aviv. Iran spent decades reducing the conditions under which decapitation works best. So, here is the harder conclusion. Iran has not made itself immune to decapitation, but it has gone a long way toward neutralizing the short-term promise behind it. Kill the leader, and the machine keeps moving. Hit the node, and another node carries the load. Remove one commander, and a younger cadre, with Iraq and Syria behind it, steps in with fewer illusions and less caution. That is why a campaign can look tactically brilliant and still fail to produce strategic closure. Iran turned survival after leadership loss into doctrine, not contingency. The political center of gravity is the Gulf. Washington's military reach in the region is still immense. The Council on Foreign Relations notes that the United States maintains an extensive military footprint in the Middle East, including permanent bases and naval assets. Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates are not background scenery in this war. They are the architecture that allows American power to persist, surge, and threaten from inside the Gulf itself. Iran has understood that for years. Tehran has long viewed this network not as a neutral shield but as a platform that can be used to contain, coerce, and, if necessary, strike Iran. That is why Iran's most dangerous success may not be military at all. It may be psychological and political. The 2019 attacks on Saudi oil facilities at Baku and Kurais knocked out 5.7 million barrels per day, more than half the kingdom's output and more than 5% of global oil supply. Reuters reported in September 2025 that when Israel struck Hamas leaders in Doha, 2 U.S. officials said the U.S. military had been notified shortly before the strike, but that there was no coordination with or approval from Washington. Qatar condemned the attack as reckless behavior targeting its security and sovereignty. Those two moments told every Gulf capital the same thing. Infrastructure can be hit, and local territory can be dragged into a larger war on somebody else's timetable. This is where the alliance picture turns ugly. Gulf states do not need to formally expel U.S. forces tomorrow for Iran to score a strategic win. They only need to become more reluctant, more risk-conscious, and more doubtful that the American umbrella protects them at an acceptable price. In that sense, the Gulf has already started to drift, not fully on paper, but materially in mindset. Bases, airstrips, ports, and radar sites are not self-sustaining facts of geography. They are political arrangements. Once local elites begin recalculating the cost of hosting them, the visible military footprint can remain large, while the political foundation under it starts cracking. That is why the line that Gulf has not turned its back on Washington is too neat for this moment. At the level of formal treaties, maybe not. At the level of strategic confidence, the turn has already begun. Iran has not destroyed the American position in the Gulf. It has made that position feel expensive, exposed, and increasingly conditional. The economic and social bill is where the strategic picture becomes impossible to dismiss. In 2025, nearly 20 MBD of oil moved through the Strait of Hormuz, around a quarter of the world's seaborne oil trade. Over 110 BCM of LNG also passed through the strait in 2025, representing almost 1/5 of global LNG trade. About 93% of Qatar's LNG exports and 96% of the UAE's LNG exports moved through that narrow passage. UNCTAD says around 1/3 of global seaborne fertilizer trade, about 16 million tons, also passes through the strait. This is not a side corridor. It is a pressure valve for energy, food production, shipping confidence, and inflation across multiple continents. The social meaning of that choke point runs beyond oil headlines. UNCTAD's 2024 review says more than 80% of the volume of global merchandise trade is carried by sea. Reuters reported on the 6th of March 2026 that hull war risk premiums had jumped from around 0.25% to as much as 3% of a vessel's value, with ships worth $200 million to $300 million, facing premiums of up to $7.5 million per voyage. Reuters also reported that marine insurers were canceling war risk cover as the conflict widened, with damaged tankers, a killed seafarer, and around 150 ships stranded near Hormuz. That is how a regional war starts, charging households, importers, and governments far from the battlefield. Now, the original Iranian doctrine comes fully into view: survive and exhaust. Iran does not need a conventional triumph parade to impose this outcome. It needs the war to stay politically unresolved, economically expensive, and strategically corrosive long enough for the burden to spread outward, onto Gulf governments that host American power, onto shipping companies and insurers, onto fertilizer importers and energy-dependent economies, and onto Washington's own balance sheet. Once that happens, tactical victories stop speaking for themselves. So the strongest conclusion is also the most uncomfortable one. The United States and Israel may go on winning strikes, sorties, interceptions, and target packages. Iran may keep losing sites, officers, and infrastructure. But if Tehran remains standing, if its command structure remains functional, if Gulf capitals grow more doubtful, and if the cost of maintaining the old order keeps rising, then Iran has already achieved the strategic effect it wanted most. It has made the war too expensive to settle cleanly and too connected to the global system to stay local. That is why this conflict cannot be judged only by visible destruction. Iran has forced the fight onto the terrain of endurance, price, and political erosion. On that terrain, it has not just survived, it has rewritten the terms of victory.